Hi boys and girls, Miss Cunha here. We are ready to read the last and final chapter of our novel study, A Long Walk to Water. So we're on chapter 18, page 111. We are going to finish the whole book today. I know how upset you are because it's such a great book and we don't want it to end, right? It's so great when we find books like that we don't want them to end because they're so good and we want to continue reading. But all good things come to an end, right? So we're going to listen to the audible read aloud and we will annotate together as we have been doing. So remember, quick reminder, if you have your own book, you are allowed to highlight and write inside of your book. If you are borrowing one of my books, please write on stickies, okay? So let us begin with chapter 18.
Chapter 18, Southern Sudan, 2009. Nia waited her turn in line. She was holding a plastic bottle. The well was finally finished. The gravel had been put down to make a foundation, the pump had been installed, and the cement had been poured and left to dry. Before the pump was used for the first time, the villagers all gathered around. The leader of the workers brought out a big sign made of blue canvas. The canvas had writing on it. The writing was in English, but the leader spoke to Nia's uncle, and Uncle told everyone what the sign said.
All right, so that's interesting. The sign is in English, right? Let's annotate that. So the writing is in English.
In honor of Elm Street School, Uncle said. This is the name of a school in America. The students at the school raised the money for this well to be dug. Uncle held up one end of the sign. The workers' leader held up the other end. Everyone else stood around it, and one of the workers took their picture. The picture would be sent to the American school so that the students there could see the well and the people who were now using it. Then the villagers all got in line to wait their turn for water from the new well.
All right, so this is interesting, and we see this a lot, right? Where people are donating, they raise money to donate for the better of others, right? So in this case, Naya's this location, that what they're building in this location was all done with the money that these students in America raised. So that's pretty important. Okay, so let's just bracket that out. We might need this later on. All right, let's continue on the next page.
When Nia reached the head of the line, she smiled shyly at her uncle, who paused in his work for a moment to smile back at her. Then he began moving the pump handle, up and down, up and down. A stream of water flowed from the mouth of the pump. Nia held her bottle underneath the pump mouth. The bottle filled up quickly. She stepped aside to let the next person fill a bottle. Then she drank. The water was delicious. It wasn't warm or muddy like the water from the pond. It was cool and clear.
All right, so let's highlight that. Obviously, Naya is loving this water, right? It's something that she's not used to. To her, it's delicious. It was no longer muddy like she was used to, right? It was cool and clear. So it's the first time she's seeing water like this. So she's definitely very excited about it.
Nia stopped drinking and held up the bottle so she could look at it. Funny that something without any color at all could look so nice. She drank a few more sips, then glanced around. Everyone had a bottle or a cup. They were drinking that lovely water, or waiting in line for more, or talking and laughing. It was a celebration.
All right, so let's bracket this out. If it was a celebration and everybody's laughing and talking about it, they're obviously very excited and happy to have this well, right? So the people in Naya's village are excited about the new well and clean water. Let's just make this a little smaller so you guys can see, and I will oh, what did I do? Oh no, what am I going to do? Sorry, boys and girls, let's try that again. So Naya, or the people in Naya's village, were excited about having the well and clean water. I think that's what I wrote before, right? All right. All right, let's continue.
An old granddad standing not far from Nya shook his head. In a loud voice he said, "This is where we used to gather for our bonfire celebrations. I have been sitting on this ground my whole life, and all those years I never knew that I was sitting on top of this good water." Everyone around him laughed. Nya laughed too. In a few more days, the school would be finished. Nya and Deb and Akare would all go to school, along with the other children. Next year, there would be a marketplace where the villagers could sell and buy vegetables and chickens and other goods. There was even talk of a clinic someday, a medical clinic, so they wouldn't have to walk so far to get help as they had to when Akare was ill. It was the well that was bringing the village all these good things.
Okay, so let's highlight that. That's pretty important. So the well and this clean water was able to bring, boys and girls, all these great things, right, in this paragraph here. So I'm just going to put an arrow so you see that. These are all the good things, right? This people, or the kids, being able to go to school, having a medical clinic, having a place that they can buy vegetables and foods, right, and different goods. So all because of this well.
But the well was not for their use alone. People would come from miles around to fetch the good, clean water. Nya knew from listening to the grown-ups that the crew leader had made many arrangements concerning the well. No one was ever to be refused water. Some of the villagers would be responsible for maintaining the well. They would be busy with this new work, so the entire village was to help them with their crops and cattle. Other villagers, including Nya's uncle, would resolve any disputes that arose.
So it's like they had a solution, right? I underlined the sentence. No one was ever to be refused water. So everyone was able to get this clean water, right? And then the one in charge of drilling these wells was the people who, or he would hire people to take care of the well, right? So that the villagers would be able to do their own thing.
The well would change their lives in many ways. "I will never again have to walk to the pond for water," Nya thought. She wandered around a little, sipping at her cool, fresh drink. Then she caught sight of the crew leader. He was standing by himself, leaning against one of the trucks and watching her uncle work the pump. Deb saw her looking at the man. "That man, the boss of the workers," Deb said. "You know he is Dinka?"
Ooh, all right, that's important. Let's highlight that. So notice, what do we know? What do you remember about Naya and her people? They were from the Nuer tribe, right? And remember, the Nuer tribe and the Dinka tribe, they were rivals. They didn't get along. Remember, they didn't get along for many, many years because of land, right? They both wanted to claim land that was richest in water. So they didn't get along very well. But now, notice there's the boss, right? The boss of the workers that are working the well is a Dinka. He's from the Dinka tribe. So that's interesting. The fact that Naya, which is from the Nuer tribe, and they don't get along with the Dinka tribe, now has someone from the Dinka tribe actually helping them, right? And who else do we know that is part of the Dinka tribe? Huh, Salva. I wonder if that's just a coincidence. Let's keep reading.
Nya looked at Deb in astonishment. The Dinka and the Nuer did not look very different physically. You had to look at the scar patterns on people's faces to tell the tribes apart. Dinka scar patterns were different from those of the Nuer. But the crew leader had no scars on his face. Nya had heard some of the teenage boys talking about that, wondering why he had no scars when clearly he was a grown man. The leader's assistant was Nuer. So were most of the crew. They all had Nuer scars. Nya hadn't thought about it much, but she realized now she had always assumed that the leader was Nuer too. The Dinka and the Nuer were enemies, had been for hundreds of years. Why would a Dinka bring water to us? She wondered aloud. I heard Uncle and Father talking about him, Deb said. He has drilled many wells for his own people. This year, he decided to drill for the Nuer as well.
Okay, so that's important. So the boss of these drills and these wells has actually already given his people in the Dinka tribe wells and water, right? So he also wanted to do the same for the Nuer tribe. So can we make an inference, boys and girls? This is my capital I boxed out. You're going to make an inference. We can infer that the boss is what? Generous, right? Kind, also very giving. So let's write that down. We can infer that the boss, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, and I'm going to put in parentheses, he is from the Dinka tribe, right? So we can infer that the boss from the Dinka tribe is very kind. All right, and we highlighted our evidence right there, okay? So you can even just put an arrow. There's your evidence, right? The fact that he drilled wells for his own people and now he's doing it for the Nuer tribe, even though they're rivals, right? Definitely shows he's kind.
Deb had not really answered Nya's question. He probably doesn't know the answer, she thought. But now, Nya felt there was something she had to do. She walked over to where the man was standing. He didn't notice her at first, so she waited quietly. Then he saw her. Hello, he said. Shyness flooded through Nya. For a moment, she didn't think she would be able to speak. She looked down at the ground, then at the stream of water still flowing from the pump mouth, and she found her voice. Thank you, she said, and looked up at him bravely. Thank you for bringing the water. The man smiled. What is your name? He asked. I am Nya. I am happy to meet you, Nya, he said. My name is Salva.
What? Did you expect that? Oh my goodness. It's Salva. Can you believe it? Now, I knew some of you guys had a feeling that they were somehow connected, right? I mean, why else would the author decide to write this book with two characters, right? And two different stories going back and forth, back and forth. Well, clearly they had a lot in common, or they had some type of connection. Obviously, the boss, who is drilling all these wells in Sudan, and now to the New Era tribe is Salva. Remember in the previous chapter, boys and girls, when Salva says that he wants to go back to his home, right? He wanted to give back to the people in South Sudan. Well, here he is giving back, right, boys and girls? So notice how Salva's story obviously takes place before, right? Naya's story is a little more up to date, right? Or current, we can say. But it could be, right? Obviously, now Salva is older. Salva has gone back to his country and given back to his people. Wow. How cool is that? Some of you expected that because I know some of you mentioned that. Remember in a chapter, I forget which chapter, we could go back and check, but remember when we read this in class together when we said, wow, it's funny because Salva and that boss that Naya kept seeing, remember he spoke to the guys in a very nice voice and he played around with them. And then if they didn't work, he was very fierce and he was, very straightforward with them. And if they still didn't work, then he would have to yell, even though he didn't like yelling. And remember, Salva, when he was walking with the boys, the Lost Boys of Sudan, he was the same thing, right? He had those same character traits. First, he spoke to the boys, he motivated them, he kept them, happy. And if they still didn't walk or do what they were supposed to, then he was very firm with them, right? And sometimes he would have to yell at them, even though he didn't like to do that. So it's the same person, it's the same character. How cool is that? I hope you're excited as I am. So let's just write that down. So Salva has gone back to South Sudan to give back to his people. Right? Even the people that are not of his tribe. So how kind is he? Right? Pretty interesting. Hope you're as excited as I am. All right, and now let us continue reading on. Notice how this chapter was the only chapter that was the longest, right? From Naya's part, it was like 3 pages long. Usually they were a page long. All right, let's continue.
A message from ALWTW. This book is based on the true story of my life. I hope that because of the book, more people will learn about the lost boy of South Sudan. I was born in a small village called Lonarik in Toin North County, South Sudan. And just as it says in the book, I stayed in refugee camp in Ethiopia and Kenya for many years before I come to US. I'm thankful to a great many people. The United Nations and the International Red Cross supported my life when I was in danger of starvation. The Moore family, St. Paul Episcopal Church, and the community of Rochester, New York, welcomed me to the United States. I'm also grateful for the education I have received, especially at Monroe Community College. And deepest gratitude to the people who have helped me with my project, Water for South Sudan. The school, churches, civic organizations, and individuals all over the country. Special thanks to the board of Water for South Sudan and to the Rotary clubs that have worked closely with me. My dream of helping the people back home in South Sudan are beginning to come true. I overcome all the difficult situations of my past because of the hope and perseverance that I had. I would have not made it without these two things. To young people, I would like to say, stay calm when things are hard or not going right with you. You will get through it when you persevere instead of quitting. Quitting leads to much less happiness in life than perseverance and hope.
Wow, boys and girls, I highlighted those last 2 or 3 sentences. And it's so crazy how we can connect to what Salva is saying in today's world, right? April 1st, 2020. And this was written in 2010. And just a little FYI, the person reading these 2 pages was actually Salva. So it's so crazy how we can make that connection now, right? Notice how he used one of our words of the week, right? Perseverance. But look at what he says. So, and he's saying this to you guys, right? To young people, he wants to say, stay calm when things are hard or not going right with you. I mean, think about it now. Things are not going right with any of us, right? It's hard. The things we're going through are hard right now. But he's saying for us to stay calm, which is true. We should stay calm, right? It says you will get through it when you persevere instead of quitting. And that is so true. If you quit, of course you're never going to get through anything, right? You quit. But if you persevere, if you keep going, if you're motivated and you keep moving forward, then you will get through it. You will pass through it, right? Quitting leads to much less happiness in life than perseverance and hope. And that is so true. If you don't quit, you will eventually find happiness. You will eventually reach your goal. But if you quit, then there's nothing, right? You never were able to reach that goal. So that is so important. And it's so ironic, right? How we can make a connection with today. So let's write that down. Let's make that connection. I want you to write that in your own words. So I can connect with Salva's advice, because he's giving his advice, right? And finish that. Finish that sentence. How can you connect with it? You can write down based on what's going on in today's world. Okay?
Author's note.
Some of the details in this story have been fictionalized, but the major events depicted are based on Salva's own experiences. I read his written accounts and interviewed him for many hours. I also read other books and accounts by and about lost boys. For Nya's part of the story, I was able to interview travelers who have seen the water wells being drilled in villages like hers. I also benefited from examining their video footage and photographs. Known as the Second Sudanese Civil War, the conflict that is depicted in this book began in 1983. Many factions were involved and numerous changes in leadership took place over the duration of the war, but in essence, the opposing sides were the Muslim-dominated government in the north and the non-Muslim coalition in the south.
Okay, so this, boys and girls, is actually the author, right? So this is Linda Sue Park reading this section, and it's an author's note. So it is the author sharing this information with the reader. So notice how she says at the beginning that this some of the details have been fictionalized. What does that mean? Something is fictionalized. Think of the word fiction. It's made up, right? So some details were fiction. However, the major events, right, based on Salva's experience, were real. Okay, and Naya's section of the story, although Naya is a real character, it's saying that a lot of the information that she gathered from Naya's part was based on interviews that she did or that she had with other travelers, and also seeing water wells that were being drilled in the villages like hers, and watching videos and pictures, right? Maybe that's why Naya's section of the story was so short, because there wasn't a lot about her per se. It was more of the research that the author did. And then she goes on to say that obviously the main conflict, right, the main problem of the story about the Civil War was because of religion. Remember, we mentioned how Sudan was divided. North and South Sudan had 2 different religions. And of course, the government wanted everyone to follow the same religion.
Millions of people were killed, imprisoned, tortured, kidnapped, or enslaved. Millions more were permanently displaced, unable to return to their homes. Among those displaced were hundreds of thousands of so-called lost boys like Salva, who walked in desperation through southern Sudan, Ethiopia, and Kenya in search of safe haven. Many of the lost boys who were able to return home after the war found that their families had vanished. Others languished in refugee camps like those Salva lived in. Some were eventually reunited with their loved ones, often after decades apart. In 2002, nearly 20 years after the war began, the United States government passed the Sudan Peace Act, officially accusing the Sudanese government of genocide in the deaths of more than 2 million people. 3 years later, a peace accord was signed between the North and South. The South was granted autonomy, the ability to govern itself, for 6 years. A referendum was held in 2011, during which the citizens of Southern Sudan voted to become an independent nation. South Sudan became its own country in July of 2011. The war in Darfur, in the western part of Sudan, is a separate conflict not covered by the peace accord. As of this writing, that war is still being fought between factions who identify themselves as Arabic and those who consider themselves African. The two wars, combined with several years of severe drought, have brought untold suffering to the people of Sudan.
I just want to pause it for a second. I want to go back to this paragraph up here. I know she read something that wasn't in this paragraph, so that was extra information that is not in your book. But I want to take a look here. So notice how in 2002, of course, the United States helped the Sudanese people, and they passed this act to help them because they were accused of a genocide. So let's see if we could use context clues, boys and girls, to figure out the meaning of genocide. So notice what I highlighted. It says, so they accused the Sudanese government of genocide in the deaths of more than 2 million people. So this is definitely a clue, right? The fact that people are dying, and it was more than 2 million people. So a genocide is a large group of people being killed for a specific reason. In this case, obviously, it was that they didn't agree with what the government wanted to do and the religion that the government wanted them to follow.
Size, Sudan is the largest country in Africa and the 10th largest in the world. Salva has seen his family in Sudan twice more since the events of this story, including a moving reunion with his cousins, the children of Uncle Juir. And amazingly, 7 of the lost boys who walked with Salva from Ethiopia to Kenya met up with him again when they were relocated to the Rochester, New York area. As of March 2012, Salva Dude's nonprofit organization Water for South Sudan has drilled more than 100 wells in southern Sudan for Dinka and Nuer communities. The very first well was drilled in Salva's home village of Lunarik.
All right, so let's talk about that. Remember that Salva does mention this in the book, right? How he was looking forward to going back to his home and helping his people. So notice that it said that the company that he has, a nonprofit organization, which is called Water for Sudan. You can look it up, right? Google it to see what comes up because it still is a thing. They drilled dozens of wells, right, in South Sudan for both tribes, right? The Dinka and the Nuer communities. And the very first, I thought this was interesting, the very first well that he drilled was in his hometown, right, of Lunarik.
Salva now lives in South Sudan. You can learn more about the organization's work at www.waterforsouthsudan.org. I first met Salva several years ago when my husband and I learned about Water for South Sudan. In 2008, my husband traveled to Sudan to see the wells firsthand. I am grateful for his help in answering my endless questions. This story could not have been written without him. My family and I feel very fortunate to count Salva as a friend. It has truly been an honor for me to write this book about him.
We hope you have enjoyed our unabridged production of A Long Walk to Water, which was written by Linda Sue Park and narrated by David Baker and Cynthia Bishop, with additional material from the author.
And we definitely did enjoy that book, right? So I want to go back, boys and girls. I know this was the ending of the book with the author's note just giving us like the background information, but really the end of the book is a message from Salva, right? well, technically the end of the book is when we find out that Naya and Salva know each other, right? And Salva was the one that was digging these wells in her hometown. But I really enjoyed the end of the book with his message, right? And his quote, and the fact that we can connect to this quote and what he's saying in today's world, right? Boys and girls, that's so important. And I think that his words are definitely true and we should follow them, right? We should stay calm. So that is the end of our book, boys and girls. I know you enjoyed this book as much as I did. At least I hope you did. This is, definitely one of my favorites. And my list of favorite books is extremely, extremely long. But I hope that you enjoyed this book as well. So now that you have all of your annotations, boys and girls, be prepared for our final test on the novel. Remember to use the annotations that we did together in class and on our digital learning videos. You are going to be able to use your book when you are completing your quiz, so make sure you use it, okay? Because a lot of the questions will come from the annotations that we did together. Okay, boys and girls, see you soon. Miss Cunha checking out. Bye-bye.